Where's the... Thank you very much. Okay, so we had further questions. I think you've had your questions. You've had two. Have you got another one? You had one more? Oh, one more, okay. Shoot.
Chairman, is to Mr Dent, and again this has arisen out of some public perception. Are you satisfied that sufficient risk analysis has been done and that the risks identified have been minimised and mitigated against?
We think there's been a huge amount of work undertaken to identify the risks, and obviously, each of those risks have been sort of steps taken to mitigate them. You can never eliminate risk. All you can do is sort of take all reasonable steps to manage risk. Yeah.
Right, let's, we'll come back. Councillor Barker had his hand up before.
Can I just, I've got a question to you, Chair, and I've got a question to Deloitte. The question to you is, I just want confirmation from you what we're deciding here today. As I understand it, this council decided, not that I agreed with the decision, but it did decide last year to invest $80 million into the Ruataniwha water project, subject again confirmation of the decisions. And as I would understand it, we're not reviewing that decision here today. All we're deciding, looking at today, is have those conditions that the public signed off on and have the concerns the council raised been met. So it's now just a matter of fact.
Absolutely correct. It was 2014, not last year, but absolutely correct. That's what we're here to decide today. So the conditions precedent, as presented in front of us here, confirming that the decision we have already made to invest up to $80 million, the Ruataniwha water storage scheme can proceed.
Thank you. My question is to Deloitte. One of the key things for me here is making sure that there's no blowback or liability coming back onto the council. And central to that is making sure this project washes its face. We had, as a metaphor for that, 40 million cubic metres, but that was just a metaphor to describe how it was. And underneath that was to be a set of metrics. Now, you have given us here today, I want to hear from you thoroughly on this. The break-even point for the project is 41.5. That HBRIC has sold in excess of that. So if there were to be something in the future and you were put in a High Court box to testify on this with the most rigorous scrutiny possible, do you think you could stand up to the toughest question possible to say that all the figures that you could have done, should have done, were done, and your figure was absolutely accurate, that you'd have no doubt about that, and that you can assure this council that the 41.5, this project washes its face, and that the condition precedent has been met.
So on that point, since sort of fielding Mr. Bevan's question, sort of this morning we have asked BNZ Advisory to sort of rerun those numbers to try and validate that. As we sit here today, we're not. We want them to do some more work and come back to both HBRIC and ourselves to confirm that 41.5, or if not 41.5, exactly what that number is.
So you're giving me doubts now.
But supplementary to that question, as we head to financial close, is it possible, and as I would like to say, probable, that we could ask you to give us a letter confirming
Absolutely.
Confirming the numbers when they are set, exactly to cover this question.
And against each of those definitions, and we will clearly, as part of that, demonstrate exactly how those numbers calculate, and so that people can sort of see exactly how the revenue ties up to contracted water, and how the costs of those that are covered by different levels of contracted water flow through to give you your break even.
Okay.
So could I just supplement to that? So are you proposing a slight amendment to this, Chair?
An additional recommendation.
Additional recommendation?
To the Deloitte paper.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Belford.
I'm sorry, I want to stay with that line of questioning and realizing there's some constraints on this, but I think it's important for the public to understand when you say break even, you mean certain things. The 40, whatever it is, 1.5.
Yeah.
I think you're allowed to indicate publicly what that does pay for, correct?
Yes. So the intent, when we're talking about break even, we're talking about the ability to pay your operating costs and to meet your obligations to the bank. So principal and interest to the bank.
To the bank?
Yeah.
And so without getting any further into the numbers themselves, it would be true to say that there's a significantly higher threshold to be met to meet all the obligations of the project?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You discuss risk management in the context of the dam construction cost. And we've seen a presentation that says we've tried to corral as much of that as possible. But you have indicated that a caveat, which is that the DNC contract does provide those protections, except in the case of change of scope in the project. What did you mean by those caveats? What does a change in scope mean to you? What would a possible scenario be?
I can't really not contemplate, but it's essentially where the investors decide they want something other than what's in the current contract.
Or any other party that has the authority to say so?
Well, it would have to be with the contracting parties making that decision.
Well, there's some reviews, as you've heard in the discussion this morning, yet to be gone through. Wouldn't those constitute possible material changes?
But they would still have to flow through to the investors to negotiate, not and there are and whatever trade-offs would have to be made at that point.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I accept we've taken it as
Yeah.
far as we can, but
Sure.
there are steps to be gone through yet
Yeah.
that would, until we've gone through those,
Yeah.
we can't really be certain about this. Is that correct?
I think it'd be fairer to say you're as certain as you could possibly be. I mean, the history of these contracts, in recent times in New Zealand, is that they've been in these they've been successfully negotiated, and certainly if you look at the sort of the PPP experience, what's been contracted for has been what these things have cost.
Okay. Just one more on the financial side, and I have a couple of questions for HBRIC. We've seen the different scenarios of uptake scenarios, but ultimately I guess the other risk involved in there is if there were to be any what I'd call a disruptive interruption of the revenue stream. And I can imagine various scenarios where that might happen. And all I want to know is, from a financial standpoint, if there were a serious disruption, if for whatever reason a quarter of the water contractors, irrigators said, we're out of here, where would the financial liability fall? Where would the revenue come from to meet what are still ongoing interest, and at that point, presume the dam's built, so we're just paying interest?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, this is speculation, but you've still got land assets with water assets attached to them, so, the assumption would be that there'd be a price set for that bundle of assets that would see, people, stepping into the shoes of the current parties and carrying on.
The answer to that question is always given with the supposition that what I'm asking here really is, if Tom Belford goes belly up, will somebody be waiting to take over and do a better job? That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if the dam didn't provide the water people expected it would for 3 successive years in a row, and 25% of the farmers said, we're out of here, this is not delivering what we expected it to be. We still have built a dam, we still have to pay for it, we have to pay the interest. Where does the money come from when they say we're not going to pay?
The farmers have a contract that obligates them to pay.
So we're going to go sue them?
Those are sort of decisions that HBRIC would have to make, face with those.
Yeah,
Well,
the LP
RWLP would have to make at that point.
All right. To Chairman Pierce, the environmental case that you make always focuses on flows and which we're now going to spend 4 months trying to establish the efficacy of. And the mitigation projects, most of which one could argue are offsets, as some would see it, to damage caused by flooding a lot of real estate above this dam. You don't comment on the nutrient load and managing the nutrient load. In part to Rex's question, you did with respect to, well, don't worry about dairying, but the Board of Inquiry process, which you're relying on, talked about a 70% increase in nutrient load in this catchment, which is already over the respective limits in many of its parts. So could you comment further on how that's going to be managed as intensification proceeds, whatever it is, whether it's seeds or cows?
So can I address the preamble to your question as well? So the flows that I talked about, which are contributions to the minimum flows and the flushing flows, are not matters which you are going to spend any time establishing a case for. That what you're going to be spending time establishing a case for is for the additional 4 million environmental flows that the council is contemplating purchasing. So you've elided together two things that are not the same thing. Secondly, in relation to the biodiversity projects, the only one that you could reasonably make a case for as being an offset for the direct impacts of the dam is the first one that I spoke to, which is the restoration and catchment works upstream of the dam. All of the others are additional pieces of work that are not offsets or compensations for things that the dam is doing. They're pieces of work that were proposed as biodiversity contributions and agreed to by the Board of Inquiry. Thirdly, turning to nutrients, we have demonstrated to our satisfaction, to your satisfaction in public, and to the satisfaction of our co-investors, that the very stringent requirement, more stringent than anyone else currently would have to put up with, even if they get a resource consent in 2020, that the RWLP has to manage in a manner consistent with achieving the 0.8 DIN is entirely achievable. It's achievable by, in the case that we now know about, by a reduction of around 3 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen leaching averaged over the areas of land that are currently contracted for and over the footprint that is currently contracted for.
I assume when you used the word you were not referring to me.
No, I was referring
You haven't,
to you.
this hasn't been proven to me.
I have no expectation of proving it to you, Councillor Belfort.
Thank you. This last question, and this sort of moves us toward the recommendations. The recommendations include, that we're going to be voting on, they refer to the land swap situation, which you haven't commented on, I don't think, yet. And it indicates that, well, first of all, it becomes another condition, basically, that the land, in fact, is available, which that's a pretty straightforward caveat. But then you have a second or. Could you elaborate for us what the or is? I mean, what a reading of this provision, I guess you would call it, in the recommendations is that there seems to be a scenario in which you contemplate that whether or not the land swap has been legally concluded, there would be some other way of proceeding to commit funds to the dam and to begin construction irrespective.
So
is that how would that happen? What does that mean?
So for clarity, I take it you're referring to 18.2 in our paper. Is that?
I'm referring to the
Council agenda, Andy, page 6.
Council agenda.
5115.
I don't have that. Thank you. Okay, so that is That's council's recommendation to you, which comes from our paper. So I think the wording is the same. Right, okay. So, yes, we are contemplating. So the first of these two would be a complete and final settlement, obviously, of the litigation. The second is that there may be ways in which that can be avoided, or a negotiated settlement might be reached between a number of parties, or parties including the government in one form or another might come to an agreement with us to ensure that, for example, detailed design work could be commenced, and the expense of that might be indemnified in some fashion. So we're trying to leave scope here for a creative solution to the problem, and if such a creative solution to the problem were to be generated that meant there was not a risk to council funds, we would be putting that to you.
So you would be, sorry?
We would be proposing that to you.
So this would...
Again, to council, not to you specifically.
Sorry. And so in that event, you would be coming back to us, and that would, I guess, presume that you would have to rerun the traps with your other financial partners, that they were comfortable with your Plan B for handling this.
They would presumably be party to the negotiation and whatever, but I think the words in here that say approved by council clearly mean that we'll be bringing it back to you for approval.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? We had a pretty good go today. So I'm suggesting we go to the Deloitte decision first, which is on page 25, thank you. Page 26, thank you. And I'll ask the Chief Executive we've been trying to craft a third recommendation to cover some of the concerns raised around the table around the final figures. So are you happy to read that out?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're proposing is that recommendations 1 and 2 on page 26 of your agenda would stay as they are, and that an acknowledgement of the discussion that was occurred earlier around material adverse changes, that the following recommendation be included as a new number 3. And that would say that council resolves that Deloitte provide council with an assessment in relation to any material adverse changes that may be advised to HBRC between the time that the agreement that the conditions precedent have been satisfied and financial close. I'll get Leanne to type it up, might be quicker, thank you. Put it up on the board screen.
So that's a 1, 2 and 3. Is someone happy to move that? You are, Councillor Dick. Thank you. Councillor Bevan, did you have your hand up there? No. Oh, you're scratching. Oh, that's tricky. Councillor Pipe, thank you. You wish to speak?
Nothing other than to acknowledge a very full and thorough report, and I believe these recommendations, including the third one, cover Council's information requirements to settle this matter.
Councillor Pipe.
Yes, just to echo those words, thank you to Deloitte. Thank you very much. I did have concerns about the adverse material changes in the process, and we discussed that over a cup of tea, and I'm glad that that particular part has been brought into the recommendation. Thank you.
Other speakers? Councillor Graham.
I still don't have my simple one-page profit and loss for the first year, so I can't see how I'm satisfied. The word here is satisfied, and I'm not. I do not have all the information that I require, and I do not understand all the information. And so, but I do want to say thank you for all the work you've done in here. But you still haven't managed to give me the... I don't understand it all. So, you know, I'm not satisfied.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Just on the point that Councillor Graham has raised, and it comes back to the conversation we had, the point that you raised before, that we can have that information provided subsequent to this meeting, and Deloitte have said to us that they are confident that their information is correct. They want to check it with the BNZ and others just to make sure it is absolutely bulletproof, which I agree with that. So I'm wondering if the mover would be happy to add to the second part of the resolution, subject to Deloitte's providing, in a timely manner, the costs and expenses occurred at year one. Because that's what we're asking for here. You've told us it works.
But that's the third part, isn't it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's the point that's been raised by Councillor Bevan and Councillor Graham, and I have some sympathy with that. I think we should be able to see it for ourselves. I have to say, I don't. Mr. Dent sits in front of me. It looks like a very honest man. I take him as a very honest man. When he says it works, well, I accept that. I'm not going to say he's a fibber, but I also, and I would not do that, but I do think we're entitled to have, the ability to scrutinise it for ourselves. That's all that's been asked here.
That then will negate the precondition being met.
It's not intended to do that. I'm happy to say I'm satisfied with it, subject to, as Mr. Dent stood in front of us and said it is, and if he can't provide the balance sheet, well, I'll walk away from it. But I'm, on the basis of him being in front of me saying it works, I'm happy to accept that. But I want him to show me it works. So, two-step process here.
So there has been a request made to the mover.
Say again what it was.
I'm trying to get past an issue here. We've got two councillors saying they want to see the statement of income and expenditure, this is how I summarise it, for themselves on year one, see it for themselves. We're also saying we don't disbelieve Deloitte's, but we do want to view it for ourselves. So I'm trying to work our way through this and say, well, let's accept it. 4 year one of there. Yeah.
So noting that Deloitte will provide clarification on year one.
Yeah.
That's in the second, that covers it?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm happy with that. So I'm happy to vote for that.
Noting, I think the word noting is appropriate.
Okay, so mover, you're happy with that?
Yes, I am.
And seconder, you're happy with that? Okay. Further discussion, Councillor Barker? Other speakers? Councillor Bevan.
It's not a speech, Chair. It's a question about the third one. I actually can't make sense of it.
So this is, oh sorry, can I speak?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think you should. Yeah. I think you should.
There was concern about what would happen if there was a material adverse change and how that would be dealt with. So the first part of the resolution, or the recommendation, talks about if council is notified that there's a material adverse change, then we ask that Deloitte look at that and provide us with an assessment of the impact of that particular adverse change. And the second part of it is really just the timing. So it's basically between today, if you agree that the other CPs have been met, and financial close. So somewhere in that point, we have to undertake this.
Wish to speak further? Other speakers? Wish to sum up? I'll put the motion, then all those in favour please say aye. And against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, let's go now then to... I'll get there in the end. A range of recommendations which start on page 5 and conclude on page 6. And there was another addition there. Oh, Councillor Hewitt's got that addition.
So
I'm prepared to move recommendations 1 through 7 with the exception of number 2, which will be replaced, and Leanne's about to put it up on the board. Would you like me to read it out, or do you just want to pop it up there?
I'll just put that up.
Okay.
But you read it out. Go on.
I'd like to read.
I'd like it read, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Succinctly.
Standing, would you? Correct. Council agrees that the condition precedent set in 8.3.3 of Council's minutes of 25 June 2014 will be confirmed to a council meeting as being satisfied by investors and financiers providing final written confirmation of the funding that is required to build and operate the Ruataniwha water storage infrastructure. And further, 2.1, that if necessary it will convene an extraordinary meeting for this purpose under Standing Order 2.14 in order to confirm this condition precedent.
Excuse me.
Question, given that we all have other jobs and move around the place, would such a special meeting enable, for example, me to telephone in and be counted as present?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's moved. Seconder for that. Someone happy to second? Councillor Scott. You wish to speak, Councillor Hewitt.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Mr Chair, members of the council and members of the wider gallery here. Ruataniwha water storage is a legacy project. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and today our investment company has come to us and asked for us to let it proceed to financial close. I'd like to pause at this point and acknowledge the many people who've been involved in this process to date, and it's summed up in our recommendation number 7, I think it is, that we do acknowledge the work that's been undertaken by you, Andy, and your team, and the very huge amount of professional people that have been in behind this project for a large number of years. You have undertaken an incredibly difficult, challenging process. You've been professional throughout, and my goodness, the amount of information that's crossed your desk that you've done, manoeuvred in the best interests of our community is absolutely commendable. So sincere thanks on that point. As we come today to sign off the conditions precedent and preconditions, and you've put them up on the screen, so I needn't go through them too extensively, but we've received our legal advice. We've received a superb review from Deloitte today, so thank you to the team that's been behind that. The conditions precedent have all been signed off. The consents are well and truly in place through a board of inquiry process. There is a genuine customer base to this project with farmer commitment. We've got the funding that is still a little bit of a work in progress, but I get that we've got a whole lot of moving parts in this wheel, and I respect that we've still got one little aspect of this that you're attempting to try to tidy up, and it will come smartly. So we also have a design and construction contract that we've seen some changes to that today, but by and large, given the nature of the project and the many elements that are attempting to be pulled together, I think that we can all agree that there's no surprises there. We're just attempting to bring together the elements of a multi-million-dollar project. The wider environmental benefits of this project are significant. As you've outlined to us, we have biodiversity enhancements to the tune of $10 million or in excess of. There are also tremendous wider socio-economic benefits. Employment, for one. We've seen stats that have come through from different reports. They sort of range from 2,500 to 3,000 or in excess of 3,580, I think it was. Those are absolutely tremendous economic opportunities for our community to be putting people into work and providing higher value jobs. That's the most tremendous opportunity we can be looking at. If you look at irrigation projects in the South Island, we see that they're tremendous confidence pavers for investment. There are investment into jobs, investment into high value job creation, investment into expenditure, communities. the economic impacts of reliable water are just a paver to confidence within a community. I think that quite firmly, irrigation is a gift to the community that just keeps on giving. We have here represented before us today an infrastructure asset that is going to return a post-tax internal rate of return of 6.5% for the full 70-year project term. We have an infrastructure asset that will be returned into public ownership at the end of the 70-year term. There are terms and conditions within the project agreement that ensures that the infrastructure will be returned in good sound condition, and I mean that's just another aspect of all the tiny little tweaks and different aspects of this project that our investment advisors have been ensuring on behalf of the community are in tip-top condition. Today's decision is a sign-off to an investment decision. It's critically important for the health and wealth of the Hawke's Bay region, and it's critically important for the progression of this project. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that it's time to unclip the wings of this baby and let it fly.
Seconder.
Mr Chairman, and I'll also acknowledge the work that has gone into it. I think Councillor Hewitt elegantly said it, but I will endorse it. I would like to actually pick up on such things as the cost to the ratepayer should the scheme not go ahead. And there is no doubt, we might argue about the speculation as to what would be needed and the cost of that, but the cost to the ratepayer over the years in meeting the objectives of Plan Change 6 will be in the area of millions of dollars. And that will be directly on the ratepayer. And that against the fact that they will not then be receiving a 6% return as they were insured from the beginning of this project. Maybe other projects will come up that actually give a good return, but over the years we certainly haven't seen anything that is excited or got him. Exciting. A bit hard to see my notes.
It'll have more effect.
Certainly there has been no investment put in front of this council that has suggested anywhere near a similar rate of return of that. So there is a cost on the ratepayer. There is actually a loss of investment income if this does not proceed. I would also like to acknowledge the work that we had done by our independent assessors of Deloitte's. It's given us a degree of confidence about those figures, but I also note, and this has come up through the various reports, the extent to which independent analysis of this has been done. Both HBRIC have raised today that they've had an independent external audit on it, along with a lot of other advice, and I do also acknowledge the expert engineering advice from the project engineer that has really demonstrated best practice and overseeing this project and de-risking it. And I do note that the amount of due diligence, and it's referred to in the original Deloitte peer review, and it was commented on today, that Trustpower put into it as well as the current investors doing their own. I don't think anything has been scrutinised in this area has ever been scrutinised so closely to make sure the figures are right and stack up. And I do will also comment on that de-risking. The increase from 89% to 97% of the design and construction contract, that takes that risk away from the investors and puts it onto the constructors. So I think that as far as identifying risk and mitigating risk has gone, it is as minimised as it can be, and what is there has been mitigated appropriately. So the decision today, Mr Chairman, is to approve those preconditions and the conditions precedent that were still outstanding, with the means of actually finalising the investor condition once that reaches financial close. So I think that it's time to make the decision on this.
Other speakers, Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Hewitt in one respect. This is the gift that keeps on giving. It keeps on giving us heartache and more meetings to attend. And we will have one more meeting to finally sign off on the conditions precedent, and I'm actually very pleased about that, because if we had run with the original recommendations in this paper, I would not have been able to support it. I just think that the journey we've come on here, and the fact that we're dealing with the public's money, the public are entitled to know who we're jumping into bed with, and right now they don't officially know. And at least once the documentation is all signed and comes in front of us and we can consider it, at least the public have the opportunity to cast their eyes upon it just as we do, and they will no doubt have an opinion as well. So that's the reason why I am able to support the recommendations we now have. And I take you to the one that actually has been changed, which is recommendation 2, which actually contemplated delegating the final decision on this to management, which, given this is such a big call, I think is totally inappropriate. And I do note also that HBRIC, in its summary in our papers, we're also asking to be authorised to make the final call. So it looks like we had a three-way fight, but it has to be the council's final call, and it is now the council's final call to make.
Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the report from HBRIC, it talks here, this project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make a lasting material positive difference to the region and the nation, and that really stood out for me, and it kind of reminded me of the journey that we've come on. And I guess my first interest in this project before I even came on here, and I guess it was because I've lived here since 1954 in this area and seen the climatic changes and the boom and bust times that we've had in this area, the droughts and the floods. And I've experienced them all over that particular period of time, and there's been some pretty big ones over that time. And all the time that they've talked, that we've had that, there's always been that aspect of, gosh, we've got all this water going down the rivers. And certainly just this morning, as I was driving back from Hastings and I went over the rivers, I noticed pretty much almost bank to bank, the rivers were all up. Now we've had, apparently, the amount of rain that we've had in Napier over the past 24 hours is about the same as we've had in the last 5 months. And the climatic changes that are predicted for this area are going to be much the same. Long dries and intense weather periods. So those are the sort of things that we're going to be faced with in the future, and this, to me, future-proofs us in a certain way. Reliable water, we've got great soils here, we've got fantastic soils in Hawke's Bay. We are a primary producing region, and all you need is water to grow things, reliable water, and this is what this gives us. Thank you for all the reports that we've gone through. It's been as Peter said, it's been a long journey, I guess, on this one. I'm not an expert in such things as finance and tax and engineering and hydrology, all the things that the reports that we've had to look at over the past 3 years on my term on council. And I've got to, I think, rely on the experts for that. I'm not an expert on that, but we've got those reports, and we have to rely on the integrity of those people who produce those reports. And the thing that gives me some sort of assurance is that these reports have been scrutinised by a number of different parties. So the due diligence has been done, and that gives me some sort of satisfaction. So I have no problems in supporting this to take it through to the next stage, which of course is the financial close. And I'm proud to say to be part of that, mainly because I've just had my family return to Hawke's Bay, and I think that's one of the things that local people want. They've always said, we want more jobs here, we want jobs for our young ones. Well, this is that intergenerational trigger, I think, that most probably will help. It's not the only trigger, but it is one of the triggers that will actually help this region really start powering economically. Jobs for our young ones, jobs for my grandchildren who have just moved back here to Hawke's Bay. I want to see this area a great area for them, and I think that that's what we're actually empowering them to do and through this project. So I'm quite happy to support this to the next stage.
Councillor Graham.
Firstly, I want to acknowledge the work that everyone's done here, Deloitte and HBRIC directors, especially you, Andy. It's been a huge amount of work, and you've had hasn't been easy dealing with difficult buggers like me. But I can't support this today. And all these wonderful speeches that are going around, it's like I'm like at a funeral or a wedding, I'm not sure which I'm at. But I haven't got satisfaction, and I don't understand all the numbers from Deloitte yet, and I need to before I can sign off on this. So that's one thing. The second thing is we always went to the public and said there were 4 conditions precedent. And everyone knows that when I first got involved in the council, the trendy word is damn sceptic. I was a bit cross really because I felt if we're going to do a water storage scheme, we should have been doing it for Heratonga and protecting existing capital. But anyway, I lost that round, and I have been a sceptic, and I have to say that I've become more of a sceptic. Just over the last few months, I've thought, maybe this will work, and maybe it could. And I'm reassured that other people think that dairying won't go on 8,000 hectares of light soil. But the fact of the matter is, the report that we're relying on, the McFarlane report, says it will. So there's a whole lot of issues still in my mind unresolved. And until they are, and I'm relying on Deloitte to give me a hand at that, or maybe a session with Jim Scotland in a couple of weeks will help. But today, right now today, I cannot say I have all the information, and I cannot represent my ratepayers honestly because I do not understand all the issues. The second thing is a huge part of the conditions precedent was another equity investor working alongside us, and I even sign off that they're going to have preferred status. I can sign off on that our capital, a part of it is social capital, but that investor hasn't been confirmed. And, it's all too airy-fairy at the moment. Probably they will be, but they're not. And we promised our ratepayers we wouldn't sign off until they were. Well, that's going to be put over to the next council meeting, and thank goodness for that. And at that council meeting, perhaps I'm in a better position to support this project or not. But right now, I can't.
Further speakers, Councillor Belford.
A number of councillors have used the word journey, and I have my own journey on this issue, which I won't bore you with in its entirety, but I do have 5 minutes, I believe. I first started inquiring into the Tuki and its issues in 2007, and from that point on, there were a series of fractious meetings in the community about the state of the river. This council was in a state of denial at the time that there was a problem. It eventually had to relent and bring in NIWA to look at the complaints that were being made about the quality of the river. NIWA basically affirmed what the issues were that the environmental community was raising. Nevertheless, at the same time we did that, our hearings committee awarded 215,000 cubes a week of
Chairman,
additional...
I'm going to object that this is misleading information that is being given.
Can I speak to that?
No, you can't. Upheld, actually, because it's irrelevant to this discussion today.
It is relevant to why I'm voting the way I am.
But it's not a total picture, so continue.
This council overruled its own staff's recommendations that the river was already over-allocated by granting further resource consents for allocation. That same year, 2009, was also the first time I heard of the water storage scheme. At that time, there was also a whole lot of skirmishing, which has still not been successfully resolved over the poo ponds, which for most people at the time was the source of the issue that everybody was concerned about. That's still not fixed. So that early work on the storage scheme blossomed in 2012. That's when we put forward a long-term plan. The scheme that we asked people to consult on was at the time a $170 million dam. Now it's a dam that costs twice that amount. And one wonders how that mandate carries forward to a dam twice the size originally, or twice the cost originally proposed. In the same year, we did the infamous Tuki Choices consultation, which, is he still here? Councillor Gilbertson here said was thinly disguised propaganda that treats the reader as an idiot. And he was promptly replaced by Councillor Hewitt for that transgression. And what happened at the time was that basically all the environmental groups, all the environmental members of that process basically said, we're out of here. We haven't been listened to. We don't like where this is going. We refuse to sign the Tuki Choices recommendations, and at the same time refused to sign the pre-feasibility report that had been compiled simultaneously by HBRC that recommended that the project was a goer.
You've got 3 minutes left, but
I know.
I need to understand how this relates to the resolutions today, because it doesn't.
Why don't you just listen to me?
Well,
I have a right to speak for 5 minutes, Mr.
Yeah, but
Chairman.
on to topic.
I'm speaking to the topic
You're not
of
speaking.
why
You're
I'm voting.
drifting off topic. You're starting to abuse your colleagues, and frankly, if you continue down that vein, I will stop you.
Mr. Chairman, my history in this issue is important to why I'm voting the way I am. Here's my point. Once we handed this off to HBRIC, HBRIC did exactly what it was charged to do, which Chairman Pierce often reminds us. It was sent off to build the dam. That's the job we gave it. From where I sit, nothing that I've seen over the 9 years, nothing I've seen in the 32 months I've served as a counselor, waiting for evidence to the contrary, gives me the remotest confidence that HBRC, its subsidiary, or HBRC, despite the framework provided by the Board of Inquiry, will conscientiously and effectively mitigate the damage to be done by intensified farming triggered by this dam. I hope I'm wrong about that. But that's why I'm voting the way I am. I have other concerns, operational, financial, and so forth about this. I might swallow those if they were not so overshadowed by my concern about the environmental aspects of this. So today I'm voting against ticking the boxes that would advance this project based on the history that I've just abbreviatedly presented you. More importantly, I'm voting against the dam to give voice to those that I believe constitute a majority of the attentive public who are not convinced this project can or will satisfy either its environmental or economic claims and when it's stopped. These are people who for 4 years have submitted, signed petitions, sent texts and letters to the media, approached me almost daily to express their objections to the project and their unhappiness with this council. They deserve representation today, and I'm proud to acknowledge their concerns by voting against progressing this project. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Barker.
Thank you very much. I think the starting point on this discussion for me here today is the 2014 decision of this council, which decided to invest its money into this project, subject to conditions being met. And so I come at this not as a vote on principle about what this project is about. I come at this discussion here as to whether those conditions have or have not been met. For me, there are statements of fact. The first one is quite important to me, is the condition precedent about the 40 million cubic metres. Now we're told it's 41.5. I didn't ask, or none of us did ask at the time, to be given a spreadsheet setting out all this how it's calculated. What we asked was for our financial peer reviewers to tell us whether they had been or not. That's all we asked for. That was our request. They've turned up here today and said they have been. No doubt about that. What we have also asked them is to, well, come back some later date and show us how all the numbers tick. So from Deloitte's and the people who represent Deloitte's, when I look at them, they look to me to be honest people from a reputable firm, and if they tell me the condition has been met, I will accept it. I've got no reason to do anything other than that, not a shadow of a doubt. So they tell me the condition's been met, I accept their word. And also I'm grateful that they're going to not only do that, send us by letter sometime later exact proof of how that's been done with absolute confidence. The second issue here is about the investors and about the money all ticking. I, like Peter Bevan, had a real concern that we were delegating this to council staff. For me, there was a real problem here. There was a lack of separation between those who were doing and those who were making the decision whether it be met. I think that there was things were too close between HBRIC and the council staff, and secondly, I thought the decision was at the wrong level. This is saying this is a condition precedent being met, and this is a decision for governors, and that's what's going to be happening. So this is going to come back to a special council meeting to meet that, and so my concerns about this resolution have been met. That we will get to see who the investors are, we will get to see all of the details, and we'll know for ourselves. But I had also another concern, which was that there might be some changes made in the process at the last minute. Every deal gets tinkered in the last 2 inches. There's no question about that. Every deal can be tinkered dramatically in the last 2 inches because people are at the cusp, want to make sure it happens, and will make all sorts of concessions if there's sufficient pressure on them. I've got no doubt about that. So how do I, assuage those concerns? Well, I think we've done that quite well in that I've asked Deloitte to give us their view about these final decisions. So when the numbers are finally added up, they will be at the elbow of HBRIC and the negotiators, see all the details, put them in their systems, and I'll say, does this make a material difference or not? If they tell us it makes no material difference, then I'll have 2 pieces of advice. One from HBRIC, one from myself, 3, and one from Deloitte. So I will be confident that we've got the right answer. So for the rest of this, I think we're just here to make judgments about material facts. That's what we're here. Is it going to meet the condition precedent of the 40 million cubic metres? We're told yes. Are we going to be able to check as an investor and make sure all the numbers tick up? Yes, we are. So on that basis, I feel compelled to, in a way, to vote for the resolution because I can't say these things are factually wrong. What my views about the dam and so on are another matter. We had that discussion in 2014. I made my views known about that. This council decided to vote for it, and that's what its decision is. But on these material facts, well, I have to judge them as they stand in front of me, and I do so.
Thank you. Councillor Dick, do you wish to speak?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Chairman. I, like 2 or 3 other elected representatives in this room, have been in around this project for nearly 9 years now. Now, if I was a cynic or a sceptic, I would have got out by now because it would have driven me nuts. But I'm a cautious optimist, and I take note of and trust people who demonstrate their integrity and their professional knowledge. And in that regard, I must congratulate Andrew Pearce and his board and Andrew Newman. And it has been commented in some quarters that, well, did we or do we really need this HBRIC board? Well, I'm afraid that this project would not have got to this point without the dedication and the competence and the professionalism of the board and its employees, and I congratulate you for that. I'm very hopeful that this step here today will be confirmed later this year, and the dam will start building. what I'd look to after that, and I won't be around to see it, but, well, not from the inside anyway, I look forward to this council in the future using the revenues and profits generated from the scheme to reinvest in water security and enhancement of water qualities in the other 2 to 3 major catchments of this region. So it's a journey, but this is an auspicious start.
You wish to sum up? No, fine.
I'd just like to acknowledge everybody who's spoken, and Peter and Councillor Bevan and Councillor Barker have both pointed out that they had concerns about this being delegated to management, as did all of us around the table, as I understand. This is a council decision, and so hence the amendment that, well, the revised recommendation that was put up. To Councillor Graham beside me, I get that you would like to have seen water storage or water security being enabled in the Hiratonga catchment, and I look forward to working with you on that in the future, but that's not actually what we're talking about today. So that's a discussion for another day. To Councillor Belford, and you've expressed amongst, well, a little bit all over the show actually, but some serious environmental concerns, and I think that one of the biggest hurdles of the Ruataniwha project has been, and I'll highlight the word perceived, because I'm not saying that in fact, but one of the biggest hurdles has been perceived environmental impacts on the region, and we've come an incredibly long way in working with various stakeholder partners to be working through any perceived environmental impacts. There have been a lot of giving and, gives and gains to move to a position where a lot of parties who had genuine concerns have slowly moved to the side, and then there are some parties who have just continued to take and take and take. And I think as we pull the strands of this together today, it's important that all of the parties involved who share regional environmental concerns do come together to look to build a positive community. And I think our goals there for long-term sustainability, no matter how green you are, left or right. I do think there's a bigger picture here, and we look forward to focusing on them. To Councillor Barker, and you've hit the nail on the head here. We're talking about statements of fact today, and I think it's important we do focus on that. We've also covered off from most of all, particularly Christine, Councillor Scott and Councillor Dick, the team up the front has been acknowledged well and truly, your professionalism, your competence and your dedication, and I'd like to reinforce that in closing up. When we look at the journey that irrigation goes on, it can polarise communities, and I read some words out last time I did a speech on this 2 years ago, and I'm going to reread them because they come from a dream fulfilled, the story of the Opua Dam, and this is Tom Henderson's intro and outro, and he writes, during a very serious drought in South Canterbury in 1982, when rivers were drying up, irrigation development was in its infancy and our region was struggling economically, it was decided to support a proposal to obtain stored water. This would create sustainability for the future, benefit of the whole community, economically, environmentally and socially. I, this is Tom speaking, supported this action because he felt it was our region. If the region was to have a prosperous future, it had to come from the land. Despite the detractors, the doubters and the disasters, they were all proved right, and I think Ruataniwha is going to be in the same boat. They said down there at the end of the book, it was a damn good idea, and I really look forward to this process. Just all the nuts and bolts and strings tied, all been pulled together, and and I look forward to a very speedy meeting when we come together in another couple of weeks to tie together your last little legs of the financial close. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. You wish division in favour, raise your hand, please. You all good? And you all good? And against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Call the meeting to a close. More very quickly. With your microphone on.
So first of all, can I thank councillors for the rigorous examination, not just today, but over the course of the last couple of years? No.
No. Not yet.
So I wanted to acknowledge the rigorous examination of councillors today and previous meetings, which has helped us shape the project and bring it to you. And I want to also acknowledge specifically Andrew Newman for his leadership of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the meeting's closed. Thank you.